What happens when one of the world's most powerful navies dares to strike directly at the United States? In the early morning calm of the South China Sea, a Chinese submarine launched a bold attack on a U.S. warship. But instead of proving dominance, the move unleashed consequences Beijing never expected. Let's uncover how one huge mistake changed everything. Calm before the strike, it was 7 a.m. in the South China Sea, and the ocean looked peaceful. On board the USS Arlington, an amphibious transport dock ship, sailors carried out their daily routines. Some were eating breakfast, while others worked on helicopters, fuel lines, and maintenance checks. Everything felt normal, at least on the surface. The Arlington wasn't alone. It was sailing as part of Carrier Strike Group 7, a powerful formation that included destroyers, support vessels, and a small aircraft carrier operating just 20 nautical miles away. Their mission was simple: patrol international waters, show presence, and remind everyone that the U.S. Navy still ruled the seas. But unknown to them, danger was already lurking below. Since 3 a.m., a Chinese UN-class submarine had been silently shadowing the American fleet. This wasn't just any submarine. It carried advanced sonar systems, air-independent propulsion to stay quiet for long periods, and powerful YJ-18 anti-ship cruise missiles. At the same time, 3 Chinese warships, a Type 055 destroyer, a Type 052D destroyer, and a corvette, were moving into position. They were carefully staying outside radar range, using drones and sea clutter to hide their movements. The Chinese plan was bold. They wanted to send a message, challenge American power, humiliate their navy, and prove the South China Sea was no longer theirs to dominate. But they were about to make a mistake that would cost them dearly. First missile impact. At 7:18 a.m., the first strike came. From beneath the waves, the Chinese submarine launched a YJ-18B missile. Designed to fly low and fast, it skimmed the sea's surface at nearly the speed of sound. 2 minutes later, it slammed into the starboard side of the USS Arlington, shaking the entire vessel. Bulkheads rattled, alarms blared, and smoke poured from the ventilation shafts. Sailors were knocked to the ground as the blast doors sealed automatically to stop flooding. 12 seconds later, a second missile hit. This one tore through the edge of the flight deck, exploding near a parked helicopter and sending shrapnel flying across the ship. Fires broke out and communication panels sparked into flames. Chaos filled the decks, but only for a moment. The crew quickly switched into emergency mode. Firefighting teams rushed to contain the blaze. Damage control units checked for hull breaches. Medical staff carried injured sailors to the aid station. The Arlington was hurt but not destroyed. It could still fight. Yet the danger wasn't over. Chinese ships were preparing to send more missiles. The Americans had only seconds to react. U.S. countermeasures activate. The USS Arlington wasn't alone, and its escorts were ready. The USS McCampbell and U.S. Preble, both Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, immediately powered up their Aegis combat systems. Their SPY-1D radar arrays began scanning the skies for threats. They didn't have to wait long. Radar operators quickly detected multiple incoming missiles, likely fired from the nearby Chinese destroyers. This was no warning shot. It was a coordinated attempt to cripple the Arlington completely. But the U.S. ships were prepared. Within seconds, the Aegis systems locked onto the threats. From their vertical launch cells, SM-2 interceptor missiles roared skyward. In less than a minute, 3 Chinese missiles were destroyed mid-air in bright flashes. Another missile slipped through, but quick thinking from the Preble's electronic warfare unit jammed its targeting system, forcing it to crash harmlessly into the sea. The Chinese attack had failed to sink the Arlington, but now the Americans had a decision to make. Should they stay defensive and hope the situation cooled down, or should they strike back hard? The Chinese commanders hadn't expected the U.S. to move so fast, and soon they would learn just how wrong their calculations were. FA-18 Strike Force launches. By 7:40 a.m., the counterattack was already underway. Despite the earlier damage, the flight deck of the carrier in the strike group had been secured. FA-18 Super Hornets were rolled into position, engines roaring as crews rushed to prepare them for launch. An E-2D Hawkeye early warning aircraft took off first, its powerful radar scanning for targets. Moments later, waves of Super Hornets blasted into the skies, Armed with anti-ship missiles and supported by an EA-18G Growler electronic warfare jet to jam enemy systems. Meanwhile, beneath the ocean, the USS Missouri, a Virginia-class submarine, was silently stalking the enemy. It had already picked up sonar traces of the Chinese submarine and was waiting for the order to strike. At 8:05 a.m., that order came. The Missouri fired 2 torpedoes. One struck the Chinese submarine near its stern, breaking its hull. In minutes, the vessel sank, taking all 58 crew members with it. The Americans had destroyed the very submarine that started the attack. But they weren't done yet. The Chinese surface fleet was still moving in, and the U.S. intended to stop them before they could fire again. USS Missouri versus Chinese submarine. While the submarine battle raged below, the skies above turned into a war zone. American FA-18s had located the Chinese surface ships and wasted no time. The first strike hit a Type 055 destroyer, China's most advanced warship. 2 American anti-ship missiles slammed into its decks, causing massive fires and crippling its propulsion systems. The mighty destroyer began drifting helplessly, smoke pouring from its superstructure. A second wave of fighters targeted the Type 052D destroyer. It tried to defend itself, launching counter missiles and activating close-in weapons. But with the Growler jet jamming its radar, the ship stood little chance. 3 missiles tore through its hull, knocking out command systems and leaving it burning and unable to fight. The smaller Chinese corvette tried to retreat, but the USS Prevoy had it locked in. A volley of Tomahawk cruise missiles streaked across the water, slamming into the ship near its engines. It was left dead in the water, drifting aimlessly. By 9 a.m., the battle was over. The Chinese fleet, once a serious threat, was either destroyed or disabled. Surveillance drones confirmed no new enemy movements. For now, the South China Sea had fallen silent again. Chinese Navy defeated. The aftermath was devastating for China. Their carefully planned strike had ended in disaster. The UN-class submarine that fired the first missile was gone, sunk in minutes by the USS Missouri. The Type 055 destroyer, considered the pride of China's Navy, had been torn apart by American missiles. The Type 052D destroyer was crippled and burning. The smaller corvette was dead in the water. In total, China had lost 4 frontline naval vessels, 1 submarine, dozens of drones, and over 600 personnel in just a few hours. The United States, on the other hand, had taken only 1 major hit. The Arlington was damaged but still afloat, with no deaths reported. Their defenses had held strong, and their counterattack had been swift and decisive. This was not the show of strength China had hoped for. Instead, it was an embarrassing defeat. What was meant to scare the U.S. Navy had only proven its power and readiness. But instead of admitting the failure, Beijing went silent. No press releases, no acknowledgement of the losses. Rescue operations were disguised as routine drills, and shipping routes were quietly redirected to keep civilians away from the wreckage. The world never got the full story. Aftermath and cover-up. In the days that followed, China worked hard to hide what had happened. Search and rescue teams were sent under the cover of darkness to pick up survivors. Wreckage was removed when possible, while satellite images were carefully edited to erase the evidence. Officially, there was no battle, no submarine lost, no destroyer sunk. Just another peaceful week in the South China Sea. But intelligence communities around the world knew the truth. The U.S. Navy had turned a surprise attack into a stunning victory. It was a warning, not just to China, but to any nation that thought about testing American resolve. For the sailors aboard the Arlington and its escorts, the day was a reminder of why their training mattered. Their calm under pressure had saved lives and turned the tide. For the pilots and submariners, it was proof that the U.S. military could respond faster and harder than any rival expected. And for China, it was a harsh lesson. Sometimes a single mistake can cost far more than you ever imagined. One bold move, one huge mistake. The attack on the USS Arlington was supposed to send a message, but instead it exposed the weakness of China's naval strategy. The United States not only survived but responded with overwhelming force, leaving Beijing scrambling to cover up the disaster. If you found this story gripping and want more detailed breakdowns of real-world military events, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next big story. Stay tuned because history is being written every day.